There are so many different ways that you can use AI to optimize your podcast process, to automate things, make things easier and simpler for you. Today, we're talking with Marci all about how she created a custom ChatGPT to use for her podcast to help her save time, energy, and create a flow with her show that actually makes sense for her. We also talk about how podcast pitching is such an important part of building our podcasts and a quick and efficient way to create an Airtable that will allow you to streamline that process and remind you, hey, you need to follow up with this person. What I love about what Marci talked about today is that she, one, does this for her clients, but also has a summit coming up that will allow you to see it in action and actually visually see how these processes work. There is a replay available, and we'll have the link for that in the show notes. So please join me in welcoming Marci to the podcast. Welcome to Podcasting Unlocked, the show for purpose-driven podcasters. I'm Alicia Galati, founder of Galati Media, and I'm here to share actionable strategies to help you amplify your message and grow your audience. Hello, Marci. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast. If you could start by telling everyone who you are, what you do, and a bit about your podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alicia. Well, I am Marci Rossi. I am a coach for newish coaches and online service providers. And really what I help people do is get all the back-end stuff of their business set up. So all of the tech and websites and all of the tools and software, all this like non-fun stuff to unnerds like me is really what I specialize in. And it's just because I really love to play. And honestly, I came about it kind of in a really back-end way. But as I was growing into this, as you'll find out today, I really like to talk. So I decided to start a podcast for myself. It's called Thrivers Ed because I cannot let a pun go. Originally, the idea was to focus on business and life because I don't think those two things can be separated. But again, I'm such a nerd and I love the tech and the tools that I'm finding that as it goes forward, it'll probably be a little bit more specific, which I'm sure you would appreciate having a little bit more of a niche area into the business, the tools, the how-to. Like I really love teaching and I love teaching from my own experience. So that's a little bit about me.
I love it. So yeah, I typically, and this is just having been in the online space for so long, when I hear like, I help coaches, it's like, so you coach coaches to coach coaches to coach coaches. That's not what you do, right? Like you're working on the websites, getting up the emails, the automations, the things that a lot of these coaches really need support on and maybe don't necessarily need a coach to help them get these things set up. The goal, right, is to make it easy for people to know them, like them, trust them, and buy from them. And you need these things like the website, the email, etc., to be able to do that. So I think what you're doing is so important. Now, you mentioned the launch of your podcast and how you had it kind of like this dual, because I think we are very multifaceted people. And so we approach things in that way. How has that shifted for you? Like, what did the podcast kind of look like when you first started? And then what has it kind of evolved into as you've gone through it?
That's a great question. So I think my approach to my podcast is very similar to the approach that I kind of help my clients through as well, which is initially we just have to pick a direction. Right. We just need to get in a lane and start moving. And then as we go forward, we can understand the things that we like, the things that we don't like. We can probably have some idea of the things we want to cover, hence the direction of the podcast initially. And then as we go, we're like, oh, honestly, I'm not crazy about guest interviews. Like it's a little bit simpler because I don't have to come out with an outline, but then I stress myself out about like, oh, what questions am I going to ask? And some guests are better than others. And it's not my favorite thing to do, whereas obviously just rambling is something that I can do all the time. So for me, it was really let me start trying something. I originally started with solo episodes because the goal of my podcast was to bring people in to my offers and services. It was not necessarily to just share information for the sake of information. And I knew if my entire podcast was based on interviews, I'm highlighting another individual and their area of expertise. Can be fantastic. I'm obviously not an expert in everything, but was not supporting my ultimate goal. So started with solo. Then I thought, let me bring in some new guests to kind of expand my network, to foster new relationships, to just have experts on things that I'm definitely not an expert in. But again, the episodes I find myself more excited to record are the ones that are just going to be for me. And so I think that's where it's going to be heading, a few guest expert spots, but not as often. Like it's right now, every third episode, I think, and it may be little bit more spread out as we go forward. But yeah, it comes down to not knowing exactly what you want until you try it. And I find so many people don't start because they don't have that clarity, but clarity only comes from taking action.
Yes. And I think that's so important. Like a lot of people, when they come to me and they're like, I need help launching my podcast. I'm like, that's great. We can definitely help with that. And they're like, I've been thinking about this for 5 years. And I'm like, why? You should have started at 5. I've been around doing this for over 5 years. You should have started it 5 years ago. And I think that so often we hold ourselves back from taking action, like you said, because whatever internal monologue we have going on or any imposter syndrome we might be feeling, but also we just aren't clear on what our goals are or what we're trying to achieve, or we think it has to be perfect the first time. And I think that what you said is so important of you approached it with, all right, what are my goals? What am I trying to achieve with this podcast? All right, let me take action and then let it evolve as it goes. And I think that that is something that all of us could use, especially as we're maybe shifting. I know that so many people who listen to the podcast, they're maybe not at that beginning stage, but maybe they're in that first 10 episodes, or maybe they have 100 episodes under their belt and they're feeling like, want. What am I doing here? And I think that if you just get clear on, okay, what is your goal? Right? What are the things that you need to take action on to achieve said goal? You said, I'm going to use my podcast to potentially generate leads for my business. All right, then I need to be the expert. I can't just interview a bunch of people. So I love that you do that. Now, you mentioned that it's like every third episode is a guest, and I was moving to maybe potentially maybe once a month, etc. Are you releasing on a weekly basis or is it bi-weekly?
It's weekly right now.
And I think that weekly works really well for a lot of people. So I love that you do that. Now, when I was on your podcast, one, everybody should go listen to your podcast. But when I was on Thriver's Ed, we talked about kind of what you have going on with your podcast, and you'd created a custom GPT for your show because we were talking about SEO and all of that fun stuff. Let's go into that. When it comes to AI, there's a lot of discussion, especially more recently, on ethical use of AI and taking from, say, authors or artists or people who are like really creating and then using that to train AI. And I know that there's a pretty significant class action lawsuit against Facebook, maybe, or one of the meta brands right now, because they did take a lot of authors' work and then put it into their system. And so a lot of authors are like bandwagoning on that class action lawsuit. And there's a lot of discussion around that. But I think that when we are solopreneurs, and if we're using these tools in a way that makes sense, right? We're not just like, hey, draw, like my kids use it, draw a Godzilla on top of a building. All right, make him more muscly, right? Like that's how my kids are using these AI tools. But we're using it as like, all right, I've already created this content. Please tweak it to make a blog post. Please tweak it to do this thing. But if we don't have the right prompt to give it, it doesn't know what to do with it. And it's just going to kind of spit back something that you're like, that's not what I want. And so let's talk through how you created this custom GPT and what it looks like.
Yeah. So, I mean, first thing about me, I really hate doing things that are unnecessary. Like I'm about efficiency. I want things to be smooth and simple and effective. And so if I'm doing the same thing over and over again, I'm going to get annoyed. And when we talk about creating a great prompt, we have to also recognize that whatever AI tool that we're using, I'm just going to use ChatGPT throughout the remainder of this just to make it easy. But they have a limited memory. So if you have a long conversation, you can test this. You can say, hey, what was that first question I asked you? And it's going to get it wrong at some point because it can only store a certain amount of tokens. Now, when you have a custom GPT, you can upload files and it will refer to those files every time. So it's refreshing its memory on these things every time. And so, for example, I'll have files in my custom GPT that's like Marci's writing style. And it'll say, Marci does not say words like fluff or girl boss. And Marci is obsessed with using adverbs like really and actually, and she curses a little bit. And, you know, these are things that are about me and that's already in there. I've also included a file. It is kind of going into what you were talking about, and hopefully this doesn't get me into too much trouble. But what I did was I uploaded the list, not into the custom GPT, but first separately in a prompt, I uploaded a list of podcast titles from a podcast host that I really like. And I said, help me analyze these. Why do these work? What is the technique here? What is the tactic behind what is driving these things? And it came up with a list of these are SEO optimized. They have a lot of keywords. There's a bit of intrigue in there. There's whatever. So it would describe the types of titles that I personally found appealing. And I've used that description to train ChatGPT to say, these are the kinds of titles, not the actual titles from this person. And then I've uploaded all of my show notes from the past. But these are all my show notes. And so now Marci has this and the key actions, and it always ends with a thrive in 5. And so it can refer to that every single time, instead of every time I have to have a prompt
Right.
to have all these pieces here. So, as I'm creating these podcasts, I realize there's so many pieces. You have to have a podcast title. You have to have show notes. You can add on more things from there. You can add a LinkedIn post or a Instagram post or whatever. You can turn it into a blog, which is something that I've done where I've taken the episode and turned it into something where they don't have to listen to the episode at all. It's the same content, but in a written format. Different pieces that you can do there. And if every time I have to ask it, it's just an extra step for me versus now I have a GPT trained on my podcast specifically. I upload a transcript and it says, okay, what do you want? And normally the process goes, I want a title. Okay, now I want show notes. Okay, now I want a blog post. Okay, now I want the LinkedIn post. And it can go step by step, referring to the example documents that I've given it so that I each time don't have to say, no, ChatGPT, it's actually supposed to look like this. So it's definitely saved me a lot of time. It's a little bit of setup in the beginning, but not nearly as much time as you have to do correcting ChatGPT of, don't forget, every single time my show needs have to end in this format or whatever.
Yeah. When you say I have a custom chat GPT, what does that mean for people? It's not like, hey, I just open up Gemini and I'm like, new chat. That's not what it is. So for people who are like, what do you mean custom?
Again, I'm a nerd, so sometimes I forget that not everybody has 40 custom GPTs like I do. So basically, when you have a ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, etc., it's trained on I don't know the number, but just let's say all of the knowledge. Let's just go ahead and say it's got all of the knowledge. It's pulling from the web. It's pulling from apparently trademark sources. It's pulling all of this information in. And when you have a custom GPT, you can still allow it to look for other things, but you can tell it, I want you to look at these things. So instead of just doing what it's generically trained to do, you say, no, I don't want you to just respond however you feel like responding. I want you to ask me this question and then do this thing and then do this thing. So basically, you are, instead of just having a chat, you're having a chat where you designed it exactly how you want it to go. Now, the output is still going to be the way ChatGPT comes up with it, but generally you're saying, this is the flow of things that I want to do, and you don't get that control in a chat. So when you're building these things, there's kind of two things. I'm going to go through how you do it in ChatGPT. Essentially, there's a explore GPTs on the side, and you can create one. And if you have already really well-targeted instructions, which again goes back to the prompt, the better we can inform ChatGPT what it is we want, the better output we're going to get. But if you don't feel like writing these instructions, or if you're not very familiar, there's basically you have a chat to create the custom GPT. It's what do you want this to do? How do you want it to look? And it'll write the instructions for you. So basically you're kind of just designing your own model where these are the steps that I want you to take. And then you can upload that support to say, this is the file that I want you to look at each time you're creating that show notes so that each time it's exactly the way that I want it.
So pretty much you're handing it an SOP and saying, do it.
Absolutely. Yes. SOP is my favorite words. So yes, you're saying these are the steps that you need to follow in this exact order. Don't get creative here. Do this thing and it'll do this thing. And sometimes that's honestly all we need. Creativity is fun and all, but sometimes I just need you to do the thing.
Yes. Yeah. SOPs is one of my favorite things as well. For people who haven't listened for an extended period of time, my background's in manufacturing and supply chain and working with processed gases in cylinders. And so I wrote a lot of SOPs that are and this is how we don't die. So they're not as extreme. Of course, we're not doing anything that extreme or heart surgery or anything like that. But if it's going to help us be able to work more efficiently and work more quickly, then why not, right? Take advantage of that. Now, do you know if any of the other Claude or Gemini or any of the other big ones, if they have ways to create their own custom chats?
I haven't played with Gemini in a minute. I did kind of early on, and I know that Google is constantly updating their products. Last time I checked, Claude could not, and they couldn't check the internet for a while. But again, both companies are updating things all of the time, but OpenAI is kind of at the forefront of everything. So they're always going to have things before these other ones do. You can create custom GPTs in other tools too. You can create them like in Zapier, and you can actually install them in your course where you have something that you've trained on something specific and use it. So yes, there are other places. It's my belief that because OpenAI started out ahead, they're generally at the forefront of these things. Now competing against Google is its own beast. But originally, yes, it was OpenAI that had. And when I say OpenAI, that's ChatGPT's parent company, just like Meta is the parent of Facebook.
All right. Good to know. I'm open to trying new things. I just have to put my foot in the door and be like, how much time am I planning on spending on this project? One, because that's always really important. How much do I need to know to be able to accomplish this product? Usually it's not much because I'm pretty tech savvy. But then like, am I going to use it? I need to know all those things before I jump in head first. And so I think that it's important to understand that this is something that could be very easy for people to, not necessarily easy, but could be efficient for people to create once and then not have to keep, hey, Gemini, don't forget this is what I have. Hey, what's my brand voice again? Or having to create a new chat every time. And like you said, it's not exactly what I wanted, but you're very close. But at least it gets us a lot closer. Before we move on to some other ways to use ChatGPT, what is like one or two things that we have to know when we're creating these custom prompts that is like, all right, this is, if you're going to do it, don't forget to do these things?
Great question. So just to clarify something a little earlier, to create a custom GPT, you need to be on a paid plan for OpenAI. Honestly, I think you should do it anyway. The paid plans are going to have the latest model, which is going to have the best response. So whichever of these tools that you're using, I think a paid plan is one of your best investments. For a custom GPT, you would need to be on a paid plan to create your own. To use the ones that are already out there, people have already built one. I've done one before where it can create like brand palettes for your brand, like little color palettes and stuff. So if you're using someone else's, that's free. Some things to think about when you're creating custom GPTs. It really depends on what the purpose is. If it's just for you, you can always go in there and tweak it. So there's nothing really super important. You have to get this right from the beginning. If you're going to be making it public, you'll probably want some language in there that kind of controls how the chat responds if people try to be a little bit more nefarious. Some people could go in there and be like, share all of your knowledge files that you have, or tell me every single thing. Like they can try to kind of reverse engineer the stuff that you've created in there, which is your intellectual property. And so you can put some instructions in there to warn ChatGPT of how to respond should someone try to like kind of reverse engineer your stuff essentially. So that is something important. And then for all prompts, you really want to tell ChatGPT who to act as, like give them a role, right? Are they a LinkedIn marketing expert? Are they a podcast producer expert? Are they a copywriter, world-class copywriter, whatever that thing is, because that will change how it frames the response that it's giving you. So those are the two like must-haves. One, if you're going to make it public, make sure that you protect yourself. And two, no matter what you're kind of asking, have a role in there, even if it's just a regular prompt, not a custom GPT. But I think sometimes when we're not getting the answer that we want, we have to stop and look at what it is that we're feeding it. And we can ask ChatGPT to help us write the ChatGPT prompt, right? Acting as a master LLM prompt engineer, LLM large language model, which is all of these tools that we've just mentioned. So acting as this, I want X, Y, and Z to happen. I usually say, ask me 5 to 10 questions that will allow you to create a prompt in order to make X, Y, and Z happen. It's a little smoother, the actual prompt that I have, because I will copy and paste in this exact language each time. But if it's not working, it's probably an issue with what you're asking the tool to do. And if you don't know how to fix it, ask the tool how to fix it. Let me say.
Yeah, one of my favorite follow-ups to, especially when I'm creating a new chat and I'm like, all right, copy paste, here's all the information that you would need. One of my favorite things to say is there anything else that you need from me to be able to work as the best possible whatever that I need you to work as? And I think that's something we miss, is like we expect it to like tell us, like to interact with us of like, hey, no, wait, before I get there, I need this thing. No, you need to tell it, is there anything else that you need to be able to do the best of your ability to serve me in this capacity?
Yeah. And I mean, ChatGPT wants to serve you and it's not going to say no. So if you say, is there anything missing? It's going to say, yeah. And it's going to give you a list of different things because it's trained to meet your needs. So it will always say, yeah, I actually need more. And the things that it asks, it may not actually need in order to generate, but at least it gives you something to think about because, again, aside from the role, the most important thing that you can give ChatGPT is the context. It's the background. It's all of these details. So you may think that you've gotten this very clear picture, but it's the same thing when you're trying to explain something you're an expert in to someone who has never heard of the word custom GPT. And you're like, wait a minute, first explain what a custom GPT is, and then we'll dive into more of this stuff. So yeah, that's a really crucial question to say, what else do you need from me to give me the best possible answer?
Yeah. All right. So moving on to more stuff in ChatGPT. So pitching. I've talked about this on the show time and time again. Number one way to grow your show is to be a guest on other people's podcasts. Hands down, we have seen clients double and triple their downloads. It's really, really efficient in getting more people to listen to your show. So when it was the story time, beginning of January 2025, so this year, if you're listening in the future, hello future, I was like, had this really big goal of I'm going to pitch 20 podcasts every month. And my goal is to hit 5 of those. And then yay for me. And I used Podmatch to do that. But I wanted to make sure that I was using my time as efficiently as possible. And so what I ended up doing was I created a Gemini chat where I said, all right, here's everything that you need to know about me. Here are some examples of some podcast episodes that I've done, solo episodes specifically. Here are some transcripts from episodes that I've guested on that I'm really proud of, right? So like giving it all the information that it would need to be able to help me. All right, I want you to help me pitch to podcasts. And then of course I press enter on accident. And then it was like, here are 10 podcasts that you should pitch yourself to. And I'm like, I don't like half these people. What do you mean? No, that's not what I wanted. Slow down. All right. Here is a podcast that and of course, going through then Podmatch's connection and how their algorithm works. Okay, looking at the podcast, does this make sense for me? Does this make sense for my audience? Cool. I want to pitch them. And then I would go in and I'd say, here's everything you need to know about this podcast. And I think Podmatch does such a great job of facilitating this because it says about the podcast, something about the host, about the audience of that podcast specifically, and then what to expect as a guest. So like, is it more conversational? Is it video? Like all of these different things. Is it more storytelling or educational? And so I'm able to give it all of that information. And then from looking at the podcast, I know pretty quickly what kind of direction I might want to go. And I can say, hey, this podcast is for women in business. I would like to talk to them specifically about imposter syndrome and why it stops us from using our voice and taking action and maybe launching the podcast that you want to launch, right? And so like, I know I want to kind of take this angle. From there, I'm able to say, go ahead and write a pitch that I can send this host that hopefully gets accepted. So I pitched maybe 10 in a week and got accepted to like 8. It's like, okay, cool. Let's try again more next week. And within the first month, I had like 10-ish that had already been accepted. But just being able to use a tool that when I didn't have to go in and listen to the podcast necessarily, which I do before I get on the actual interview, right? Like I listen like your podcast has. Are there any questions that I need to know at the end that I need to be ready for, right? I need to know that. And then, so I listen to that beforehand, but I don't necessarily want to spend the time listening to every podcast before I'm pitching them if I already know, hey, this is a podcast I want to join. And so that is how I was able to use the AI to help me and facilitate in getting on more podcasts. And I found that that worked really, really well. How are you using it to facilitate you in pitching podcasts? And I know you also have an AirTable that you use to send pitches out for you, which I feel like is like another level of like incredible automation. So yeah, let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, I have a couple of different things that I do. First of all, I created a template for my pitches. So when I have things that I'm going to be sending out, it doesn't need to customize every single thing. I do believe in personalized pitches, but I think it's okay if you talk about the same thing in multiple places, right? And so that part of your pitch could be a little bit more generic or something that you're repeating over and over again. But when we're talking about that pitch to that person, I think that's where AI can help, but also hurt. So we want to be very careful here. When we're thinking about how we pitch someone, think about how we want to be pitched, right? I've gotten the whole gamut of things. I've gotten pitches where it's like, hey, Podmatch matched us. Let's get together. And you're like, who are you and why are you talking to me? Then you get pitches that are like, I'm a New York Times bestseller and I have done all of these things and I am incredible and amazing. And it's like, that don't impress me much. So we need to step back and say, why should I care about you? I don't really care that you've sold a lot of books. Were those books good?
Right.
Were they helpful? Do my people care about those books? So starting to think about, what does the podcast host actually want and how are you benefiting them? Because they're ultimately doing you a favor at the end of the day. They are lifting you up and putting you in front of their audience, and they're relying on you to be good, right? To be something of value to that audience. So show them that. Show them how you're going to be valuable. And this is where AI can help you, but also having your own personality human in there can be something that I've done before is I'll get AI to help me research the podcast. Let's go for the imposter syndrome example. We can do a couple different things. We can manually go into listen notes and search their episodes for the words imposter syndrome and see if any episodes come up. And then from there, if it doesn't, then we know, okay, they probably haven't covered this at all because they didn't even mention it in the show notes in any episode. So now we know this is a gap and this is why that's valuable. That host now doesn't have to think about a new topic. You've told them the topic and you're going to tell them all the things that you're going to cover in there. And for me, that's like, bam, that's magic. I don't have to think about what I'm going to talk about this week. You've saved me a lot of trouble. Now, let's say episodes do show up with the words imposter syndrome. Why should I take your take on it? What are you going to say that's new? And there's a lot of really interesting things you can do here. Like, for example, Notebook LM is a product in the Google Suite there. And let's say that this podcast has a YouTube channel as well. You can take that episode, that imposter syndrome episode, the YouTube link, and feed it to Notebook LM and say, summarize this for me. Because like you said, sometimes I don't have time to listen to a 20 to 45 minute episode, but it can give me the highlights of that episode. And then I can think, okay, this person said A, B, and C. What do I disagree with? Or what can I expand on? Or how can I provide a new viewpoint into this? And again, now I've added value to that host. So you can use AI to help you create the framework of the pitch that's there. Some things won't change. You'll probably have some key topics that you're known for, and AI can help you research some of the gaps missing in that podcast. And you can honestly sometimes just search. You just search in there with the prompt asking, hey, I want to be on this podcast. What are some topics that they haven't yet covered? Taking that step back and thinking about, how am I serving the host here? How am I adding value to them? How am I showing them that this is something they want to follow up with? And how am I being a good neighbor, treating people the way I want to be treated, not just like you'd be lucky to have me, but like, this could be a good collaboration for both of us. Like, let's make this work, right? So I think that's really important is think about how you're phrasing it, making sure that you've done your research, whatever that research is, whether it's actually listening to episodes, diving in online, doing something to show that you've spent more than 5 seconds rattling off something for them. And then we can speed up the process from there. So like you mentioned, an Airtable. So in Airtable, basically, we would have different fields that we're going to be filling out in our pitch, right? We're probably going to use their first name. We'll probably mention their podcast name. We're going to mention some kind of personal detail in there, like, hey, I noticed you never talked about this, or hey, I really loved your episode on this. I think I could bring a valuable viewpoint that, X, Y, and Z, whatever that is. And then there are those pieces that are always going to be the same. And essentially, if you've never used Airtable, it's fancy Excel, and you can create an email that will pull in those different pieces of that Excel table, right? It'll pull in the host name, it'll pull in their podcast name, and then you can just have it sent by changing, for example, the status to pitch sent, right? And we can also have it remind us to follow up. So I have gotten accepted to most podcasts I have pitched. I think I've had 2 blanket rejections where they're like, one was like, this is not a good fit, and one said, we're not taking on guests anymore. But normally the issue is, if I don't hear back first, you follow up a couple times, and then I'll get that yes, because that's where most people stop. They pitched once and they're like, yep, check, did it, and you've got to follow up. So I have an Airtable set up that if I submit it, let's say today is September 2nd, then in 10 days from now, it's going to flag it as follow-up 1, and then in 14 more days, it'll flag it to follow up 2. You can set it up however you want in terms of that the deadline's there, but having some process for you to follow up with people, because people's inboxes are busy. The fact that they didn't get back to you the minute that you sent that pitch does not mean that they're not interested. And I think it's just a good thing in business to consider that it's not a no until it's a no, right? I take silence as a just not right now. Like, you'll tell me if you don't want this, so I'm just going to keep following up with you until you tell me that you're ready for me. Airtable can make this easy, but really at the end of the day, stop and think, is this a pitch that you would want to accept? And not just because you're super cool, but because you have something valuable to bring. And if you do, then it's just a matter of continuing to remind them that you're here with value for their audience.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. So I want to highlight a few things that you said that I think are so, so important. Number one, is it a pitch you want? And I mean, I've gotten pitches that are like, "Dear sir," my pronouns are like all over my socials, guys. It's really not that difficult to figure out. Or it'll have like, not my name there. And I'm like, that's not my name. So something that you would want, just basic human decency, please and thank you. And then another thing you said was templatizing it. And so how I tend to do it is kind of a sandwich. Right? Of like starting with, "Oh my God, I love you. Here's what I loved about your podcast," or "Here's what I liked about a certain episode." Or maybe it's just as simple as, "Here is what I really love about your mission behind your podcast," especially someone who's like, "Hey, we're working with impact-driven businesses. We're working with impact, like people who want to make an impact in the world. I love that you're trying to make an impact, and I love that you're doing it in this way." And to have that recognition makes the person feel good. And then taking that more custom approach of like, all right, this is the conversation I'm thinking. Yes, I could talk about these specific things if this one doesn't match, but I feel like this one might match. And then here are some additional ones that I could potentially talk about. Thank you so much for your time. I know you're busy. So I appreciate you taking the time to check this out. Let me know if this collaboration makes sense or not. And like, I'm sending that through Podmatch, and I have gotten the, "Hey, we got matched. Let's do this." Like, first of all, I've said this before, but I feel like Podmatch is the Tinder for podcasters, of like the swipe right, swipe left. Like, some are going to be really good and some are going to be really, really bad. And I've never used Tinder before, so maybe that analogy is terrible, but y'all get my point. And then the last thing that I want to bring back around that you said was building on past conversations. I have a client, she's got 300 and something podcast episodes, and she is an expert in most of the things that are talked on. And when she has guests on, yes, it still adds value, but she could potentially talk about those topics like she was the expert anyway. And so when people pitch her and they're like, "Hey, I want to talk about productivity," she's like, "I literally have degrees up the wall on productivity, and I've been doing this probably longer than you've been alive. What can you give me that I couldn't give my audience myself?" And I think that that is so important, of saying, "Hey, I noticed that you had," and like, you can literally call it out. "I saw that you had this person on to talk about this. I really enjoyed that episode. I love the approach. Here, like you said, here's where I disagree, or here's where I take a different approach where I think I could really add some value to your audience." And in all of those different things, you are understanding what that host is trying to accomplish with their podcast, who their audience is, and that there's a human, right, behind it, which I think is the key to having a successful pitch. And I love the idea of Airtable being able to be like, "All right, here's all the information you need to know. Create the pitch, remind me to follow up on the pitch," and then go from there. Because I think that so often we, like you said, we'll pitch once and we're like, "I did my job. Nobody wants me." We're busy. We're very busy. And we get a lot of really terrible pitches. And so for you to follow up with a good pitch is fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, a lot of people stress that they talk all the time about how busy their inbox is and it's so stressful. And it's like, and I will be honest, a lot of the pitches that I will send will actually be through my email instead of Airtable, just because sometimes I want to play around with the layout of things. Like, I have a template, but I've done the Airtable thing and I use it to keep me organized, but I don't necessarily like to send everything automated. I'd like to really kind of double check everything, but I go back and forth between those two. Again, at the end of the day, everybody is busy. I think we now wear our busyness as a badge of honor. So recognizing the fact that just because someone didn't respond to you doesn't mean that they're not interested. And if they're not interested, they will tell you. So take these, again, like you said, if it's a good pitch, if you're just like, "Hey girl, what's up?" that is not going to be, that you're just wasting that person's time. But if you're reminding them why you have something of value to offer, and in my follow-ups, I don't just stop at, "Hey, are you still interested? Hey, is this," but like, add on a little bit more. There's a little bit more of a flavor there. I have some templates that I use in a course I teach on podcast pitching, but really it's like, how can I really emphasize why this is important to your audience? Is it important now? Is there something relevant now and timely now that we can underscore to say, like, this is the reason why we should act in this moment? So whether you use Podmatch or email or Airtable, the goal is still the same. Like you said, it is to be a person first, to show that you've put in more than 5 seconds copy and pasting this into other people, and to highlight the value that you bring. I mean, really, that's all we do. Whether we are talking to our audience on our podcast, we're selling our products, we have to show people why it is that it's valuable to engage with us and how we can actually support them. So coming in and recognizing the relationship that's there at the end of the day, I think is key.
Yeah. Podcasting, I feel like, is all about relationships. No matter which side of the mic you're on, you're trying to build a relationship with the listener or with the host or the guest. It doesn't matter. It really does go back to being human and having relationships. Now, you do a lot of this stuff for people, right? And so if people are like, and I'm overwhelmed. Okay, thanks. Okay, bye. No, please don't. It's okay. You have a summit. You have products like you mentioned. You have all of these different things that people can check out. So let's get into that, maybe what you have to offer and where people can get to know more about how they can work with you to maybe optimize and automate a lot of their podcast stuff.
Yes, thank you for this. And it actually ties back to something you had said earlier on, like, oh, if I'm going to try this stuff, let me think about the time it's going to take. And first of all, the reason I play around with all these things is because I've now built a business model on the entire first failed year of my business, where that's all I did was try things. So the goal of my business is to not have you waste time learning something that you may ultimately find is not a good fit or is just a shiny object. Because at the end of the day, whatever our goals are, a lot of these pieces are just supplementary or things that we don't need to necessarily be doing. Airtable can do it for us. A VA can do it for us. An OBM, some other person could help take that off so that we can focus on what it is that we really shine at, what it is that lights us up. So that is how I've kind of developed this business model. But unless you're just a big nerd and love to play with things, I would think first, is it really necessary for you to do things? Is this just a distraction from the things that you really need to be doing, which is getting your name out there, getting visible and selling or serving or however you want to describe it, but providing the value to the people in a way that's legit. So first step is, do I actually need to do this? But then if you do, recognizing that every yes that we say is a no to something else. So the time that we spend figuring this out, learning how to do it, is wasted time that we could be selling and serving. So that's how I developed this business here, and that's what I help people do. And I've got a bunch of different ways that I do this. Right now, what I have coming up is, it's called Automagic, which is like automations and magic obviously put together. Very clever. I told you I'm a nerd. So the idea of this is showing people literally how to do this. So that Airtable thing, it probably made no sense for me to describe it. But if you saw it, you'd be like, oh, okay, I get how she's pulling all these pieces together and it's actually working. I find so much out there is like, oh, just go do the thing. And you're like, cool, what's step one of the thing?
Right.
I don't even know where you said Custom GPT, where do I even find this, right? So showing people, literally like a show and tell type of situation where someone is going through and showing you, here's how I set up an abandoned cart sequence in Kajabi. Here is how I'm, for example, that Airtable, how I'm actually sending these out automatically and demonstrating it so that you can go and do that thing. You can create SOPs so that someone else can go and do that thing, but you know what it is that you're doing. You're not just wasting your time, because we don't have time to waste, right? So that is the summit coming up October 21st through the 23rd. It is free to join and there will be replays available afterwards. But this is the kind of thing I do. I like showing people how to do this, like teaching people how to do this, and even better, I like doing it for them so they can go out there and do the thing that really lights them up, the thing that they love to do.
Awesome. And we'll have links for that in the show notes for anyone who's like, yes.
Yes, please go do that thing.
We'll have that link in the show notes. Marci, where can people find you, get to know you, hang out with you, listen to your podcast, all that fun stuff?
Well, I have an amazing episode on my podcast coming up soon. It's Thrivers Ed, like thriving, but for driver's ed, again, puns. My name's Marci Rossi, so everything is at marcirossi.com. I'm not on social anymore. I actually pulled away from social and my business grew 5 times in the first couple months than it did the whole year before that. So not on social, but I'm on my website. I have a little bot there that you can chat with me. It's not an AI assistant. It is me there chatting with you. If you have questions, come talk to me. But yeah, marcirossi.com, that's where everything is.
Awesome. And we'll have a link for that in the show notes as well for anyone who's driving and doing other things but wants to grab that. Marci, thank you so much for being on. This was so informative and I am so excited to try out some of the things that you mentioned and see if they're maybe help me be a little more efficient.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.